Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Bethany, and today's recipe, I'm gonna show you how to make my favorite side dish, I think ever, which is scalloped potatoes. This recipe is so good. My family goes crazy for it whenever it's served, and it's our #1 side dish for truly any holiday meal. So let's get right into it. Okay, so for any scalloped potato recipe, we need cheese. And we're gonna be using 1½ cups of sharp cheddar cheese and 1½ cups of Gruyere cheese. And I'm gonna shred that up in my food processor just to make things a little bit easier. And the Gruyere is gonna add a really nice creaminess. It's a really cheesy cheese. And then the sharp cheddar is of course great for melting, but it's gonna give a really nice salty flavor. All right, so the first thing that we wanna do is make our cheesy sauce that's gonna go in the scalloped potatoes. I like to do that before I cut the scalloped potatoes, and I'll get into why that is. So first, we're going to melt ½ stick of butter in a pan. And I use salted butter, has more flavor than unsalted. So we're just gonna melt that. And ½ stick of butter is 1/4 cup. So that's the amount that we'll need, and we're just gonna melt that. And once that is mostly melted, we're gonna add 1 large diced onion. We're gonna mix that in with the butter, and the butter is gonna add so much flavor to the onions and the whole sauce. All right, I'm gonna turn my heat up a little bit to medium heat, and we're gonna add a pinch of salt, just to season every layer, get the onions sweating a little bit. And we're gonna cook these until they're soft. We're not browning them, just gonna cook them for about 3 to 4 minutes on a medium to low heat. All right, so the onions are perfectly soft. Smells already delicious with just the onions and butter. Now we're gonna add 4 cloves of minced garlic, and we're gonna add our herbs. So we're gonna add about 1½ to 2 teaspoons of sage and rosemary, both fresh. We like to use fresh herbs in this recipe and in a lot of our recipes because it's gonna give the best flavor. So we're gonna stir this with the onions and the butter just for about a minute. That will help cook the garlic and also have the herbs really bloom in flavor. All right, next, we're gonna add 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. I also use white whole wheat pastry flour for this if I wanna have it be a little bit healthier. You would never know though. But I'm gonna use 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, and that is equal parts to the 1/4 cup of butter. You wanna make sure your flour and your butter are always equal parts in a recipe like this. So we're going to stir this constantly for about 2 minutes with the butter, the onions. So the whole purpose of this is the flour is going to help thicken the cheese sauce that we're gonna use, but we don't want a really floury taste. So this whole process is gonna help kind of cook off the flour taste that it would give to the dish. Now we're gonna add our liquids, and this will help deglaze the pan if things have stuck a little bit. So we're gonna first do 1½ cups of a chicken stock or chicken broth. We're gonna do 1½ cups chicken stock, and then 1 cup of milk. And what I love about this recipe is I really wanted to tone down the creaminess in this recipe. It has enough cream with 1 cup milk and the cheese that we're gonna put in, but I really wanted to add more chicken stock than what's typically in a recipe like this because I think it's too heavy. And this is still beautifully creamy and cheesy, but it's not overly creamy, if you know what I mean. So I like cream and cheese, of course, if you know me by now. But I think sometimes the scalloped potatoes in a lot of traditional recipes can just be too much cream. So the chicken stock kind of lightens things up a little bit. And we're just gonna stir this in there. All right, so we've stirred in the liquids. Now we're gonna add 3/4 cup of shredded cheese. Then for the sauce, we're gonna season it with 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. We already have the sharp cheddar cheese in there, some salted butter, so that should help season it as well. Now we're gonna let this simmer just on a low to medium heat for several minutes, about 3 to 4. We really want this sauce to thicken up and just become a really nice cheesy sauce. So we'll give that a few minutes to really thicken up and cook. So next we're gonna slice up our potatoes. So I have 3 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes here. You can also use russet potato, whichever work for this recipe. And I'm gonna use a mandolin slicer to slice these into 1/8 inch thick slices. You could also use a chef knife to do this. You just wanna be really accurate and careful to just get them at the right thinness, because if they're too thick, it's just gonna take a long time for this to cook in the oven. So that's why I like to use a mandolin slicer, and it's a lot of potatoes, so it's gonna take a while. So this makes it very quick. So we're gonna use our guard and just slice this up. So as you can see, these are perfectly cut, and one potato took like 10 seconds. So it's very easy to do it this way and very safe if you use your guard. So one thing to remember is that potatoes do oxidize. So once the interior kind of hits the air, it can start to brown a little bit. So you could do half of the potatoes at a time, then layer, then slice the rest. I kind of do that if they're really bad and they're really turning. All right, so we finished with the potatoes. Now we can layer everything into the dish. So I have a 9x13 baking dish that I'm gonna be using. Mine's oval. You can use a rectangle shape, doesn't matter, as long as it's just big enough to fit everything in it. So the first layer in this scalloped potato is gonna be the potato. We're gonna put a nice layer of these on the bottom. We kind of wanna cover the bottom as much as we can. Next, we're gonna sprinkle just a little bit of salt over the potatoes. The sauce is seasoned, but the potatoes are not, so we just wanna do a little bit of salt, then a little bit of black pepper. And remember, we're gonna be doing this to all the layers, so we don't wanna over season it. We just wanna give a little pinch of salt just to season the potatoes. Then we're gonna spoon our sauce over top. Again, this smells so good. Just smells like scalloped potatoes and the holidays. And I'm just gonna spread this over top of the potatoes. Then we're gonna sprinkle some of our cheddar cheese and Gruyere over top of the sauced potatoes. All right, now we repeat the layers. All right, so we're on our last layer, and I had a good bit of potatoes left over, so I really layered them over top of one of the other so that I could use as much potatoes as I can. And I got about 4 layers of the scalloped potatoes into this, so that's kind of how many layers you could expect. But now we're going to add the last bit of our sauce onto this. Spread this over top. Then the last of the Gruyere cheese and the cheddar cheese. All right, so everything's done and layered. Now we're gonna cover this with foil. All right, so first we're going to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees, and we're gonna bake it covered for 60 minutes, then uncovered for 30 minutes. And what we wanna do is really trap the moisture to really cook those potatoes. That's kind of why it takes a little bit longer. The potatoes are hard. We wanna make sure those are nice and tender. So that's why we're gonna trap the moisture at first. We don't want it to dry out. Then at the end, we'll brown the cheese for the last 30 minutes. Okay, so the scalloped potatoes are done. They smell amazing. We're gonna taste them. Like I said, this is a favorite side dish for the holidays, and we'll be serving this for Thanksgiving. The last time I had this, actually, we served it for Easter, so we really do have it for like every holiday in my family. So if you don't live in the United States, you can make this for Christmas, but we have Thanksgiving coming up, so we will be making this for Thanksgiving. I'm excited to taste it. It smells so good. Sorry, I am enjoying it so much. I don't even want to stop eating it to talk about the tasting. Seriously, what is better than potatoes and cheese baked in the oven with some herbs? It's so good. But I hope you get to try this recipe, especially with the holidays coming up. It's the perfect side dish to pair alongside a turkey instead of mashed potatoes or a roast beef, anything. It's so good. We actually serve this with our Thanksgiving turkey and beef tenderloin for Christmas. So can't wait for that. And if you do try this recipe, feel free to let me know. I love hearing from you all. It's been, again, such a pleasure to hear from everyone week after week in the comments. Shout out to some of our viewers. John Cornell, you've been with us since day one. I remember your comment on my very first video. Thank you so much for the support every week. And George L, which I believe the username is GL Leon. Thank you so much every week for your encouraging words in our comments. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, if you guys try this, feel free to let me know. And as always, we'll catch you in the next recipe.